Hi, everybody. Welcome to Franco Broadcast. We're very pleased to have with us this evening Christine McDonald, getting to be a very well-known author, but she's done so many other things. She's a very inspirational guest. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Christine McDonald. Welcome.
Well, hello, Bob. Thank you so much for having me.
So you can give us a background, and then we can ask you questions.
Okay, awesome. So background. Where do you want me to start?
Wherever you would like. I know you wrote a book called Cry Purple. If you want to start there or prior to it, it's up to you.
We can start there. I did. I wrote a book, Cry Purple. And in fact, Leonore and David Dvorkin were amazing people in assisting me in publishing and editing that book. I wrote the book during the time. I guess I wrote a lot of the stuff for the book in 2009, 2010 to kind of talk about some of my lived experience. I had been homeless for nearly 2 decades and involved in commercial sexual exploitation or more commonly known as domestic sex trafficking. And drugs, of course, homelessness, and of course that also offered me into a number of visits into the prison system because criminalization of homelessness is kind of a big thing in America. And then, eventually after a whole lot of things on that journey, I ended up kind of getting my life together. And shortly after I kind of started on that journey, I became disabled in about 72 hours and lost my sight and had to have both my eyes medically removed, which kind of started a whole new journey as if being homeless for 20 years wasn't enough. So once I had my eyes removed, of course, that started a whole new journey of, just being a blind single parent, trying to figure out how to live life in mainstream as no longer living in a park outdoors, and not having an education, and having to get an education and kind of fight for services. And I just kind of learned about a lot of things that were barriers for me, who happened to have quite a bit of tenacity after living on the streets for so long. I had to fight a lot of barriers to kind of just societal stigmas, legislative barriers in order to kind of put my life together. And I realized it just shouldn't have been that hard. And, I realized that, a lot of like Health and Human Services and HUD and a lot of service provisions, the powers that be, if you will, that kind of determine, what does homelessness look like? What do the barriers look like? What are the things to break those cycles look like? A lot of people that are in places of decision making in the midst of the bureaucracy don't have that same lived experience and don't necessarily understand the challenges and barriers that somebody walking through navigating services really face. And so that kind of started my my little idea of putting this book together. My company I'd worked for a length of time, for about 5 years as a social worker, had closed down and it left me unemployed, and I couldn't get a job. Nobody would hire me because I had a criminal background. I had been homeless, and I had no eyeballs, so I was also disabled. So you couple being a convicted felon, even though it had been a number of years, with also, having, a major disability, there are a lot of societal barriers from, typical mainstream society. So when I was facing losing my unemployment because I was running out of unemployment, and my small child and I were going to be homeless, I decided I was going to, finish my book and self-publish, with the independent publishing agency, I guess, with Leonore and David Dvorkin, which were awesome people to help me kind of through that, navigating that. Because my goal was to sell enough books to buy a house. So I was like, I'll sell enough books to secure housing. And I did. I bought me a house. And so, I have a second book. It's called The Same Kind of Human, Seeing the Marginalized and Exploited Through Eyes of Grace. and it just takes a deeper look into, societal stigmas on marginalized and exploited individuals and how we can be better human beings to one another. So there you go. That's kind of it in a nutshell, I guess. Hello?
No. Hello?
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Christine.
Oh, I don't know. Did you want me to keep talking?
Are you looking for questions at the moment? We'll be happy to answer them.
We can take some questions, and then I can kind of, go more into my story.
All right. Anybody with a question for Christine McDonald, go right ahead.
I have one. Christine, how did you initially become homeless and stay on the streets for so long?
I came from a very dysfunctional family, a fatherless home. I did not know who my father was. My mom suffered from mental illness, and she also was an alcoholic. I was in and out of foster care, and there's just a whole lot of things there. And I ran away a number of times, and eventually, at 15, I ended up in an abandoned house, homeless, and my only goal was to not get caught because the system kept reunifying me into this dysfunctional household. And so I felt safer on my own individual survival skills than I did, being in the system or being reunited with my family.
Any other questions? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I have one. Christine, I really think I commend you for your strength and journey and being a writer and one of Leonore's clients. I understand you're one of her top-selling authors, and I'm wondering, did you do anything specific as far as marketing, after you were put on Amazon and all that stuff, or did you just get lucky?
I think I just got lucky because I've never paid for any kind of marketing. I've never really I've shared my link on Facebook a couple of times when my book first came out, but I think I just, got lucky at a time. Trafficking is kind of a thing, and, a number of trafficking organizations, a number of prisons. There's a Bible college. Somebody read it that teaches at a Bible college, and now they do a whole semester learning about domestic mission. And they, working with homeless people in America. Another college picked it up, and they use it in their English department for narrative writing styles. It's a mandatory required reading. And then some treatment centers use it, and some prisons use it. And there's a few nonprofits that use it to train their volunteers so they can understand better the people they're working for and some of the things that they've experienced so that they can understand. Sometimes people come in from past such as mine and, 20 years of living on the streets and are kind of sandpapery, if you will. Sometimes charm is not one of the better qualities. And so if we can understand better some of the journeys and plots that they've had, it's easier to understand, some of the layers of the onion, if you will, as they're trying to work with them and provide services, and why that they may, challenge the service provisions and not be as receptive as we think that they should.
What kind of drugs were you involved in when you were doing that?
My drug of choice was crack cocaine.
Uh-huh. Well, you've come a long way, and congratulations on the book and your journey.
Thank you so very much.
Christine, do you have any sight at all right now?
I don't have any eyes. Both of my eyes were medically removed.
I see.
I went from fully sighted to having both of my eyeballs taken out. So.
Christine, could I make a comment about your book and why I think it's been so successful?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Leonore. I was the editor of the book, and as Christine kindly said, my husband and I, also produced the book and got it published. Anyway, yes, it's been far and away the bestseller among all the books, almost 30 books that we've now edited for others. And I really think sure, she's been lucky to some extent, but Christine has also worked very, very hard at getting the word out to, these various organizations that help people. And she's had a lot of experience with, legislative work, trying to help people who have been in prison and so on, and victims of sex trafficking. But I really think the basic reason why the book has been so successful is because it just tells such a compelling story, and it has so many different elements in it that interest people, and not just the blindness element and how she lost her eyes to an illness, but being a blind single mother, having been a drug addict, having been a prostitute, just so many different things in it that interest people, different groups of people. Put it all together, it's just one heck of a book. And everybody that I know that has read it said, oh my gosh, this is just such a grim story, but the ending of it is so hopeful. And I love the fact, Christine, that even with all this tragedy and all this horrible stuff that's in the book, you managed to put in some humor as well. I that was really neat. That you were able to laugh about certain things. And just the whole package is just an amazing, amazing book. And I just recommend it to anybody who hasn't read it. Cry Purple by Christine McDonald. And it's on Amazon and Smashwords and various other things. All that on her website, all the links to where it's available. And it's not a long book. It's just a little over 200 pages printed out. So it's a quick read, but a very, very compelling one that you will never forget. Let me assure you, once you read this book, you'll never forget it.
Aw, thank you.
Christine,
friendly.
This is Patty Fletcher. Can you hear me?
I can.
Good deal. I wanted to ask you, first off, I didn't get a chance to look before I came on tonight. I've been meant to do it all day, and I just didn't ever get time. Is your book on the NLS Bard website yet? And if not,
I don't even know how to go about anything like that.
Okay, that's what I was going to tell you. If not, did you know how? It's very simple to do, and I think it has really assisted me incredibly, having my book on there. I contacted them at the bottom of the main page on the BARD website is an email address. And if you write to that email address, they will, and tell them who you are and give them your information about your book, they will direct you to their division that make the decision about what books go on BARD. And what they do is they appropriate so much money per year for self-published books, etc., that are not on the best-selling list, and they will read a copy of your book, and if they like it, and I think they will, if they put mine on there, I'm certain they would like yours, they will take it and record it. It took me less than a year from contact to release, and I just think it would be extremely helpful to a lot of blind people. You just contact NLS is the best thing. There is no process.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you so much, Patty. I got to be really honest, Patty. I emailed this to Bob. I don't know if he read it, but this is actually the first time I've ever been invited to a group of people that kind of deal with low vision or blind people. I guess I don't have really any blind friends.
It's because your book did not start out with you as a blind person. It ended up with you as a blind person. And
right.
And unfortunately,
but I overcame as a blind
and that's how it works in the blind community. And,
yes.
Now that we've introduced you, I think you'll get a lot more calls.
Oh, yeah.
That would be really interesting
Definitely.
because I just haven't been in the blind circles. I've never been invited. I told Bob I've never been invited to play with the blind people.
I don't understand that, but I do.
I don't understand that. I think that was...
I do and I don't. But I'll write you after. I don't want to get you off, and I don't want to get people off the topic. But I will write you afterward. I'm about a fourth of the way through your book.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Yes, this is Karen, and I just wanted to ask Christine, one, how did you become blind, Christine, if you don't mind my asking?
You're fine. I was actually, okay, so it's kind of two different things. It was a combination, it was the perfect storm. I was born with Stickler syndrome.
I've heard of that. Yep.
Yes, and a lot of blind people have or people with severe low vision or hearing impairments have Stickler syndrome. I was actually born with Stickler syndrome, but due to neglect, I was never diagnosed with Stickler syndrome. I had a lot of symptoms, but I was never diagnosed because I didn't have proper medical care as a youth, or else I would have been diagnosed because, it affects your heart valves. It affects so many different things.
Yes.
Actually, it wasn't until I was pregnant with my daughter, Mary Christine. She was born with Stickler syndrome. And after her birth, which during her birth is when I lost my sight, during her pregnancy is when I lost my sight, she was born, and she was diagnosed as a syndromatic baby while I was still carrying her at the lower craniofacial part of her skull, which is also another facet that can be part of Stickler syndrome, although I don't have that particular symptom. But when she was born, she was diagnosed right away with Stickler syndrome, and the doctors said, well, maybe you have Stickler syndrome. However, I still had some other symptoms that didn't make sense. And so what happened, they sent me to the National Institute of Health in Maryland, and we learned that I had something called Voigt-Korenagi-Harada syndrome. It sounds really crazy, but it's actually an autoimmune thing that I was genetically predispositioned for. So what we found out through all these genetic testing is that I have heritage. And I had, and VKH, Voigt-Korenagi-Harada disease or syndrome is something that was very prevalent. It was still rare, but it was more common, 200 years ago to the Native American culture. And apparently I was predispositioned, and something happened that triggered that in me, because I had Native American heritage, so I was genetically predispositioned to this VKH, which is very rare. They said there's only 5 doctors in the United States of America that could have even diagnosed me with it. In fact, they sent me, like I said, to the National Institute of Health to get me diagnosed because nobody could figure out, what was going on. And with the VKH, it causes inflammation. It does something called peaking. And what that happens is this inflammation happens in the eyes and in the ears, the same areas that are affected with people with Stickler syndrome. But that's because Stickler syndrome is a connective tissue, so you have very small amounts of connective tissue. But the inflammation, because of the lack of connective tissue, right, caused irreversible damage. So in 3 days, when my VKH peaked, because I had Stickler syndrome, my eyes weren't strong enough to handle the inflammation, and they pulled with blood and eventually had to be removed.
Okay, anyone else?
Christine, this is Patty again. I wanted to ask you, you were talking about you hadn't been asked to the blind community. I'm going to have to hang up in a second because I've got somewhere else to be. But I wanted to ask you, if I wrote to you, would you consider doing a interview for my magazine? I have a magazine that I put out, and I would write you interview questions, and you could answer them, and I could put them in my magazine. I have quite a decent readership, and that would introduce you to other people.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fun. I might learn some tricks about being blind if I found some.
Well, you
it's
never
really
can.
that easy.
No, it isn't. It's not, and it's not a perfect science, and there's no right or wrong answer, so we'll all learn something. But, yeah, I'm happy to have you, and I'd also like to put it up on my blog, because I got a note from WordPress yesterday that said I had 1,500 hits in a day, so that's really picked up, yeah. So I just wanted to ask you that, and I'm going to go ahead and bow out, and I'll come back and listen to the rest of the recording, because I have to be somewhere else, but it was a pleasure to meet you.
You too. Thank you. I'll look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, Jeffrey, I think I heard you start asking a question.
Oh, yeah, what format is the book available in? Yeah, the book that you just...
Well, they got it in Kindle for the Nick. They got it in paperback. It's not in audio yet. I don't really know exactly how to go about that one either.
Christine, Bard, if Bard accepts it, they will record it. That's what
right.
That's what they professionally record.
I do know that's what she said. That's for their library. You don't get to sell that. That's
with the
for free.
No, but people read it and probably buy it.
It's great. It's great publicity because only blind and visually impaired people, that's my understanding anyway, can access Bard. But once the book is there, then a lot of people will read it, and the hope is that they will then recommend it to other people who will buy copies. But yeah, for everybody else listening, yes, the book is available in ebook and print, and mainly from Amazon, but also Smashwords and about 4 or 5 other places. And probably most of you know that if you buy a Kindle book, an ebook from Amazon, it is print to voice or whatever they call it. It is available. You can listen to it. It's accessible.
And I think people that use iPhones, visually impaired people that use iPhones, they can read them on their iPhones too.
Yep. Right. You can do it lots of ways, and so it's certainly accessible, even though it has not yet been professionally recorded. But Bard does that, and Patty, she had to leave, but Patty told me recently that she was extremely pleased with the recording job that Bard did of her book. So
I don't even know how to navigate that Bard site. I haven't even figured out how to I got a picture from them people, and I don't even understand how to download stuff to it to use it. That's how technically challenged I am.
Well, maybe Patty can help you, or possibly Reg can, since he's such
right.
But if you need some help from somebody, just get it, because it sounds like it's a really, really good thing to do, as far as promoting your book goes. And it doesn't happen overnight, but I think for Patty to have done that in about a year, from start to finish was not bad at all. So she said it's really been helpful in spreading the word about her book. So I would certainly encourage you, to do that.
Anyone else? Don, Ed, Marcy?
I have a question, Bob.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, okay. Christine, this is Don from Massachusetts.
Hi, Don.
My hat goes off to you. That you pulled yourself together and you really made something of yourself. Did I hear you say that in your hard times you were engaged in crack cocaine?
That was my drug of choice, yes.
Yeah, okay. But the reason I'm bringing it up, because I hear that that is very, very difficult to kick that. It's just as hard, if not harder than heroin.
Yes, it's right up there with it.
Right. Now, did you get drug counseling to get off of that?
I ended up, so eventually my hopelessness was in such a dark place of disparity, right, out on the streets. I weighed 88 pounds, and it was just bad. I was arrested 103 times.
Wow.
Because most of our society generally, especially in big metropolitan communities, our strategic planning for dealing with homelessness is criminalization. We arrest the homeless for loitering, we arrest, sleeping, on sidewalks, all these kind of things. So a lot of those are my types of arrests, right? And so, because it's an easy way for the police to get their little kudos for the month, right? Is to charge the homeless. I mean, it's the truth. And so, I tried to go to treatment once, and in my second book, I go a lot more. So in Cry Purple, I'm very narrative, and I really don't get too much into how I feel about situations. I try to let the reader kind of use their own moral compass with each experience that I share. In my second book, I'm very opinionated, if you will. Everything that I wanted to cut loose with in my first book, I went on and threw it all out there in my second.
Christine, I'm going to make an assumption, and you can correct me, of course. It's only an assumption on my part. Based on the fact that you've had 103 arrests. Now, that many arrests tells me that the sentence or the punishment or penalty for the crime you committed either was suspended or very, very, very brief.
Well, if most of those were municipal arrests, like sleeping, in a public, trespassing, sleeping in an abandoned building. So they take you to jail, they book you, and they let you go. Or you do, 3 days in jail, or you spend the night in jail and you get time served. Right? Now, prison, I've been to prison 7 times. I have 9 felony convictions. Now, my longest time in prison, I did 17 months in the county and went to prison from the county. So I did 17 months plus 3.5 years. So I did almost 5 years, or just over 5 years at my longest stay. But that was a prison stay, not just an arrest. And some of those arrests, you go in and they, in our community, if you are homeless and you don't have a picture ID on you, they can take you to jail for 72 hours. Even if they know who you are. And justify it by saying, we're just going to run a fingerprint check and make sure you're who you say, well, you know who I am. You arrested me twice already this week. But, unfortunately, that happens to a lot of homeless people. And I was an addict, and I was a prostitute, and, I had a pimp, and, he'd be across the street, and, he didn't go to jail. I'd go to jail. So it's complicated. And, going to treatment, I tried to go to treatment a couple times during my journey and in the midst of my addiction, and I share a couple of these experiences in my second book. But, I'd go to treatment and took the drugs away, but that didn't deal with the trauma. I mean, I witnessed a murder. I identified one of my best friends who was a prostitute murdered, and her body was mutilated. I mean, I had been through a whole lot of very traumatic experiences.
Oh, good Lord.
And once the drugs went away, I still had a lot of trauma. And treatment wasn't designed to help me cope with the trauma, right? So when they took the drugs away, I no longer had a coping mechanism that helped me deal with the post-traumatic stress, and the trauma, and just, I was bitten by a rat out on the street.
Oh my God.
And some of these things, I mean, I don't want to traumatize anybody from my experience, but these things, they scarred me. And when I took the drugs away, I had to deal with these things. And when I was using, I didn't have to face, the nightmares that haunted me from my lived experiences. And so when the drugs went away, when I went to treatment, I ended up, doing self-harm. I started cutting myself, because I just didn't know how to make that stop. But, of course, I later learned that when I was in college that, when people do self-harm and they've experienced a lot of trauma, the self-harm actually kicks in the brain stem so that your brain can get out of its state of trauma. So it's not stuck in its emotion and its panic and fight or flight state. So the self-harm actually kicks in the brain stem so you go into that physical instead of the emotional state. And so it actually breaks that cycle of trauma. But nobody explained that to me when I was going to counseling. I didn't learn that until I went to college, right? I was like, that makes so much sense. I wish somebody would have told me that when I was seeking help. But, so I did try to go to treatment a couple of times in the midst of my addiction. Unfortunately, they're not. At that time, we didn't look at anything other. If we take the drugs away, everything else gets better. There was no addressing, the other things or what got me to being an addict or the trauma that I experienced during my addiction.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Joni, Ed, Marcy, Lauren? Anybody?
Christine, did you go to college after you lost your sight or before?
I did. Actually, when I was on the streets and stuff, I was basically illiterate as a sighted person. It was one of my, one of my bigger challenges when I lost my sight was I couldn't get services because I was illiterate as a sighted person. So a lot of my, I was in the blind thing because I had a kid, I had a newborn baby. I couldn't get food stamps in my state. We were at that time, we were one of 11 states that wouldn't let anybody with a drug felony get food stamps or TANF or public housing. They were banned for life, no matter how clean they'd been or anything. There were no exceptions to the rule. I had a newborn baby, and I had worked at McDonald's, but I was blind. I couldn't go back to work. So I faced some systemic issues with bureaucracy and systems and service providers because I fell in these cracks. Being illiterate, they told me I was going to have to take, X amount of years of Braille because I didn't know how to read and write as a sighted person. Just all these different things that they told me I couldn't do. They put me in a sheltered workshop, putting pins together for a very menial amount of money that wasn't enough to pay my rent. And so that kind of started my advocacy. I guess the first time I made the front page of the paper was in 2006, and I've been pretty consistent in the media ever since. But it was just always challenging. This isn't okay, because we all, mainstream society, thinks systems and programs are set up to work, but there's lots of gaps. And then there's also a learning curve to navigating systems to get services. And if you don't know what you need to advocate for yourself you're not going to get it. And so that's always one of my big things. We have to learn how to be self-advocates and know what we need and know how to ask for it. Because if you don't know specifically what you're asking for, you're just not going to get it. Because, the systems aren't created to divulge, I think you need this, this, and this. They're created, what can I do to help you? Well, example, I had a client once, and he came in, he's like, I need a job, but he didn't have any shoes. He'd been homeless for a lot of years, and he wanted a job. He was working with folk rehab. They sent him to my office for employment, and he didn't have shoes, and it was in the wintertime, and I said, well, don't you think, my assistant told me he didn't have shoes, and he'd been in my office 3 times, and none of the times did he come in shoes. And I was like, well, I think you need shoes. He says, well, if I have a job, I can get shoes. Well, that makes sense to him.
Yeah.
Because he's been homeless for decades, right?
Right.
And so sometimes that, if we don't teach, people that need services and whatever that is, that could be somebody with whatever that looks like, right? If we don't, maybe it's somebody that's a wife whose husband dies and he's always been the provider and now she's got to figure out life on her own, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If she doesn't know exactly what she needs, she's not necessarily going to get what she needs.
How old is your, I think you said you have a daughter?
I have a little boy and a little girl.
Oh, yeah, too.
I do. My little girl, Mary Christine, is 11, and my little boy is 10.
Oh, that's nice.
My little boy's 10, and my little girl's 11.
Very nice. And it's certainly not easy being a single blind parent.
It has its challenges.
Certainly does.
And I would
Christine, do you feel that there's a lot of scrutiny around you because you're a single blind parent? I've heard stories over the years, as I'm sure a lot of other folks on the line have, about how people in your shoes are sort of like under a microscope simply because of that fact.
I have never had a single incident that I've had to deal with any kind of I have friends that had babies that were blind, couples that, I wouldn't say they're friends, people I know in the blind community, in my community. And they, they were a blind couple and they had a kid and the hospital didn't let them leave with the child. I've never really dealt with that. My bigger scrutiny, I haven't ever had scrutiny when it comes to me and my kid. I've had scrutiny. I deal with challenges getting the school to share information in a way that I know how to help my kid because he doesn't have a disability. They don't feel obligated to help give me the information. But before he could read, I needed to know what I needed to do with him to help him through his educational process, right? And so I face those types of barriers, those types of challenges. But, my bigger challenges have been, employment barriers, not necessarily because I'm blind, but because of my felony convictions. But then you couple that with also being blind. And people in the blind community or blind services don't want to work with me because I'm a former felon, and people that work with people with criminal backgrounds and felonies and specialize in that arena don't want to work with me because I'm blind, right? So,
that's 22.
Yeah, so it's definitely a challenge of just knocking on doors because, nobody really wants to claim me.
Did you get help from when you went blind for learning how to do day-to-day stuff and mobility, and how were they on that level?
Well, I guess I did get some of that basic services. Most of it was, being sighted my whole life. That helped me kind of just figure stuff out. Yeah. I think that was useful for me. But I still like going out. I went through mobility. I still have a lot of anxiety about walking outside by myself with a cane. It's not because I have trouble navigating. It's because I have a lot of fear because I've been through a lot of things, and I lived outside for so long. So I do have, that's a very high anxiety situation for me. So I choose to go sighted guide 90% of the time. But, I take the train by myself and just, solicit assistance from the driver. Hey, I'm blind. Somebody help me to my seat, or just, do I go left or right? So I have some issues navigating outside by myself just because of my past trauma that has nothing to do with my blindness.
Yeah. So how long have you been blind, though?
11 years.
11 years,
Oh, and I'd like to comment to everybody that, at least from the pictures and also the videos of Christine that I've seen, is that her artificial eyeballs are just amazing. I mean, they look so realistic. And Christine, you have commented that a lot of people don't recognize at all at first that you are blind. And I
do deal with that a lot. And sometimes I just mess with people, and we'll go to an event or something where they don't know me, and I'll wear glasses because they match my outfit. Just to mess with them. Do those help you see? No, but they sure are cute.
Well, they're really just beautiful, beautiful prosthetic eyeballs. And
I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate that an ocularist actually donated these to me. So these wouldn't have been the typical ones that, my Medicaid, at that time I was on Medicaid, would have paid for. It was an amazing ocularist that did not take Medicaid, and he said I had gone to him for some reason. I don't remember how we ended up interacting in the beginning because I was seeing an actual Medicaid ocularist at another facility, and I had already had one prosthetic made because they can't take out both your eyeballs at the same time. You have to take them out in the process. Anyway, so I'd had one made by Medicaid, and I had ended up with this other doctor at this hospital where I'd had my second eye taken out, and he's like, oh, my goodness, where did you have this prosthetic made for my other eye? And I told him, he says, sweetheart, you are too young for this. He says, there is no reason for you to wear this thing. He says, you know what? And he gave me an appointment card. He said, call me. And I called, made an appointment. He took that Medicaid-made prosthetic, and he trashed it. And he gifted me 2 prosthetics from his office, and he says, there's just no reason for you to have, the cheapest option out there just because Medicaid doesn't want to spend a few more dollars to give you a better product. It just doesn't even make sense. He says, you're just too young. But I was very blessed that this gentleman took that interest in me.
Oh, that's
and
great.
Christine, I thought that was, I want everybody else to know that Christine does talk a great deal in her book, Cry Purple, about, adjusting to all this, adjusting to being blind. And an amusing part, Christine, I thought was how you learned to put on makeup. That was just so funny. And she does.
I sell makeup now. Because every blind girl should sell I sell makeup now.
Really?
I do.
Well,
you
look beautiful. The pictures of you are just so beautiful, and really glamorous now. And but anyway, everybody else, she just has this such interesting stuff in the book about adjusting to being blind, and one of the most touching parts I thought were the parts about her little boy Ricky, and
he was only 3.
How wonderfully helpful he is to her. It's just so touching, Christine. It was wonderful, and
pretty awesome.
it's just such an amazing story altogether. It's much more than about her years of being a prostitute and a drug addict. It goes to a much more hopeful place after that, and
it's
also impressive.
It's only like the first 10 or 11 chapters even talk about and they're only just a few snapshot experiences from that life. And I'm very frank in the introduction. I believe that my journey began after I lost my sight. Most people find, I don't know, voyeurism, I guess, in that first part of my life where all that trauma and all that awful stuff was going on. Whereas I feel like my journey became much more challenging and complex once I lost my sight.
All right. Anyone else?
Christine, I would like to know, you mentioned your second book that's going to be coming out, and I can't remember, I'm sorry, from what you emailed me before, when you will be ready to send that to David and me for the production of the book. Can you estimate that?
Well, the estimated date of so my second book is called The Same Kind of Human, Seeing the Marginalized and Exploited Through Eyes of Grace. And so it's a little more faith-based, and it's all about how can we love with intention to hurting people in our society. And then it has the second half of it is all these great tools of how to build authentic relationships and how do we measure trauma in our own lives. Even if you haven't come from something like me, maybe you just have lived what you see as a normal life and a normal childhood. How can you measure the traumas? Because, there are certain factors that can inflict trauma on us, even if it's emotional trauma. And so I have all these great tools and things from all these different great trainings and things that I've encountered on my journey, and some I've seen helpful, some not. But I've compiled all the best practices that I see that are really effective with hurting people, whether that's heartbreak, whether that's, trafficking, whether that's substance abuse. We all have brokenness somewhere inside us. Anyway, so she's supposed to be done with that by August 30th. And then as soon as she sends it to me, I'll be able to read through it and then send it on to you. So I would assume August 31st or September 1st, somewhere in, September 2nd, somewhere in those couple of days.
Oh, great. Well, that's good. And then, as I said, we'll just give it a quick little once over to check for any remaining typos, and then we can get it produced for you. Hopefully before the end of September. That would be just wonderful to have that.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Yes, it'd be really exciting.
Really
and it has such a great following now. I believe that's going to help give me an added platform for my new book. But my new book isn't going to be as attractive to as broad of an audience. Cry Purple's pretty neutral, whereas this book is really talking to a lot of people of faith. How do people of faith really do more harm than good sometimes? And well-meaning people, how can they, even if they're not Christians, they do more harm than good? So there's going to be some people that aren't going to love it. It's not going to cross over as many channels as Cry Purple did.
Well, sounds interesting.
Yeah, I think you should
could
be
you tell us about
about
the
it.
cover of the Crying Purple? Because if you remember how David did that, because he does awesome covers.
Well, I don't. What now? What was the question?
Your cover on your book, because David does awesome covers, because my book, people loved the cover, because I couldn't really judge with my vision being so bad. But people and his covers are just so awesome. I was just curious, of a description of it.
For Cry Purple?
Crying Purple, yeah.
Cry Purple. Well, actually, Leonor and David, this is kind of funny. David actually created a cover. But I had already kind of in my mind envisioned what I kind of wanted because there's, Cry Purple, Leonor named a story in my book, which was really a human moment for me, if you will, in my book, Cry Purple, and it's called Cry Purple.
Right.
Richard, can you turn that down a little bit, please? Richard.
Yeah, it was chapter 3 of her book.
Can you turn that down a little bit, please? Okay, thank you. Yes. Yes,
yeah.
I was asking my son.
Chapter 3 of the book came to me without a title. Some of her chapters had titles and some didn't, as I remember anyway. It's been a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
And
right, and some of them I had titles, but I wasn't crazy about them.
Yeah, and chapter 3 it has to do with flowers, specifically purple irises, dark purple irises, a lot of flowers in a garden. And yet the chapter is extremely sad, and it really made me cry. And after I finished it, I thought, gosh, maybe a title that will work for this chapter is Cry Purple. And I proposed that to Christine, and she liked it a lot. And she was the one who then chose the words Cry Purple as the title of her book. The book was untitled when I was editing it. And then, yeah, she's exactly right. David created an original cover. I don't even know what the flowers were, but they were more sort of reddish purple than the color of the beautiful dark purple of dark irises. And it wasn't great. I myself really wasn't crazy about that cover. And then I can't remember who it was, Christine, but somebody else along with you.
I think my friend Christy from college, one of my college professors, found a couple pictures of irises or something and sent them to you.
Yeah, that's right. She did. And then as I remember,
you guys kind of put stuff together.
Yeah, then we looked for other photos of purple irises, and David came up with a really, really gorgeous picture. And then, of course, he created the cover the way he always does with the lettering and the background and all that. But, yes, it was actually, somebody else's suggestion for that particular cover with the purple irises. But it's just perfect, and it's honestly, I think, the most beautiful of all the covers that we've ever done. And it's just so striking, and everybody who sees it says, wow, is this gorgeous? And I like the short 2-word title, too. It really works. And everybody's intrigued by the title. They always ask me, where does the title Cry Purple come from? So I tell them the story, and that's really neat.
Chapter 3.
Yeah, and I think the same kind of human has a pretty intriguing, I think that's a catchy title. It's the same kind of human. Because I'm saying that the invisibles of our society are just like us, right? They have the same humanity. They have the same, hunger. They have the same pain. They have the same, you know what I'm saying? They're the same. Yet we don't always view them the same.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd like to mention too about your cover for Cry Purple, Christine. In the upper left-hand corner, we have a really tiny little picture, a little thumbnail picture of Christine, the way she looked, just a few years ago, very pretty with her blonde hair and lovely blue-green eyes. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a thumbnail of in the book, she has these really striking pictures of various mug shots from her first one when you were 16, I believe, Christine, the very first one.
Some of them were from, they would only some from my adult age up, and then we'd take some random ones to show the sequence of the deterioration of me over the 2 decades.
And the last one, the one that is also on the cover of the book, she was really nearly dead. She just looks terrible in it. and so it's so striking to have those two little thumbnail photos on the front cover of the book, along with the title and the subtitle. And it just makes a wonderful composition. It's very, very striking. Everybody that I know who's seen it is just blown away by it. And, and then inside the book it has bigger copy. There are larger copies of about 7, I think, of the mug shots, and then a couple of other shots, like when she was working and so on. So, but now, Christine, I mean, I as a person who's getting older myself, I'm absolutely amazed at how wonderfully you are aging. But, well, not that you're old, but you look so great now. I'm really envious.
God has definitely not only restored my soul, and faith wasn't a part of my life for a lot of years. I didn't believe there was a God or there wouldn't be the ugly things that I was enduring and that my friends, the murder and the violence and all these things in the world. And so, did you turn that back up, Richard? I need you to turn that back down, please, sweetheart, just for a few more minutes.
Mute at 4-star if you're going to have a conversation with someone else. 4-star, please.
I'm sorry. Oh, so sorry. It's my little boy. He's trying.
Any other questions for Christine before we wrap it up this evening? Well, thank you, Christine, for sharing your experiences and talking about your book with us here at Branco Broadcast. Continued success. I hope your second book is as successful as your first.
Well, thank you very much. It was great talking to all of you.
And likewise, and thank you again for appearing.
Thank you.